I'm not much for religion like Christianity or Buddhism. People ask me, why would I make such a choice to be part of such an experiment? Well, the clear answer is this. When my wife and my son died in a car crash on a freeway, I became depressed and mentally unstable. Why not be part of such an experiment to prove that there's an afterlife, that my wife and my son are somewhere in this universe? Here's my story of what I experienced in the death experiment. I was sitting on my couch, watching TV, when suddenly there was a knock at my door. I looked through the peephole, and I saw two strange men standing outside, dressed in black suits with ties, holding a briefcase. Out of curiosity, I opened the door. One of the men asked me a strange question. Would you like to be part of an experiment called the death experiment? A flood of thoughts crashed through my mind, each one louder than the last. Was this some kind of joke? Were they serious? The death experiment? The words echoed inside my head. What kind of experiment was that? What did they mean by death? But then, I thought about my wife, my son, the violent wreck on the freeway, the empty spaces they left behind. What if this was it? What if this was the answer I had been searching for? Why question it when the name said it all? The death experiment. I exhaled sharply, my fingers twitching at my sides. How do I sign up? Where do I join? I asked. The man with the briefcase gave a slight nod, his expression unreadable. If you come with us now, you can join immediately. They turned, walking toward a sleek black car parked along the curb, the tinted windows swallowing any reflection of the streetlights above. My body moved on its own, my pulse hammering as I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. I slid into the back seat, buckled in, and felt the cold leather press against my back. The driver pulled away smoothly, the hum of the engine filling the silence. The city streets blurred past in streaks of neon and shadow, but soon we veered away from the familiar. The roads became darker, more isolated. The farther we drove, the more I realized we weren't heading anywhere ordinary. Then I saw it. A massive, polished white facility loomed ahead, a monolith against the night sky. It was impossibly large, both wide and tall, stretching out like a fortress. The exterior gleamed under the harsh floodlights mounted along its perimeter, giving it an almost sterile glow. But something about it felt wrong. Armed guards stood like statues at the front gates, their faces hidden beneath dark visors. Their rifles were held firmly across their chests, fingers resting near the triggers. Surveillance cameras dotted every corner, their red lights blinking in slow, measured intervals. As we approached, the heavy metal gates groaned open, sliding apart with mechanical precision. The car pulled through, gliding down a long, straight path leading to the facility's main entrance. Two towering doors made of reinforced steel, their smooth surfaces unmarked by any signage. The moment we stopped, one of the men stepped out and opened my door. "Follow me," I obeyed, stepping onto the pavement. The air was cold, laced with the faint smell of antiseptic and something metallic. I walked with them toward the entrance, my shoes tapping against the pristine concrete. As we reached the doors, a small red scanner flickered to life, reading the man's face. A quiet beep followed, and the heavy doors unlocked with a deep, mechanical thunk. Inside, the facility was eerily silent. The walls were a sterile white, the floors polished to a mirror-like shine. The ceiling stretched high above, lined with long, fluorescent lights that buzzed softly. As we walked further, I noticed reinforced doors on either side of the hallway, each labeled only with numbers. No names, no descriptions. At the end of the corridor was a reception desk, manned by another figure in a black suit. The woman behind the desk barely looked up as the man beside me handed over a thin folder. A few quick stamps, a quiet murmur between them, and then she gestured toward another door. "Proceed," she said flatly. We moved through, stepping into what looked like a waiting area. The furniture was minimalist, the air too still. Before I could process it all, a door on the other side swung open. A man in a white lab coat entered. He was tall, thin, with sharp features and a gaze that seemed to look through me rather than at me. He carried a clipboard, his fingers drumming lightly against its surface. "So you're the patient," he said, his voice smooth but clinical. I met his stare. "If that's what you're calling me," he gave a thin smile. "Welcome to Nexus." The name sent a chill through me. Nexus? I asked. What even is this place? The doctor adjusted his glasses, tapping his pen against his clipboard. Nexus, the Neurological Experimentation and Xenogenesis Understanding Syndicate. His eyes gleamed under the sterile light. A government-funded facility dedicated to one thing, exploring what lies beyond the threshold of death. His words hung in the air, heavy and absolute. And in that moment, I realized I had truly stepped into something I couldn't escape. The man in the black suit stepped forward, setting the briefcase on a nearby metal table with a dull clank. The doctor took it without a word, his fingers ghosting over the latches before flipping them open with 2 sharp clicks. A stack of neatly bound bills filled the interior, row after row of crisp, unmarked $100 bills. The sight of it made my stomach twist. Curiosity gnawed at me. "What's in that briefcase anyway?" I asked, my voice steady despite the unease creeping up my spine. "The one they showed up with at my doorstep?" The doctor didn't hesitate. "Money," he said plainly. I frowned. "How much?" He glanced at me, adjusting his glasses. $50 million, I blinked. $50 million? He nodded, as if it were nothing. "And there's another briefcase waiting for you. Same amount." The weight of his words settled in my chest. $100 million. Enough to disappear, enough to rewrite a life. But there was a catch. There was always a catch. I exhaled. "What's the catch?" The doctor smirked. "You complete the experiment. You keep your mouth shut." He snapped the briefcase shut with finality. "This is top secret. Only a few are selected every few years. You were chosen." His eyes locked onto mine, cold and unreadable. And for the first time since stepping into this facility, I realized I wasn't just signing up for an experiment. I was signing away everything. The doctor's gaze lingered on me for a moment before he straightened his coat and exhaled. "Are you ready?" I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "Yeah." He nodded once. "All right, come on." He gestured with a tilt of his head, turning toward the hallway. Without hesitation, I followed. 2 armed bodyguards fell into step behind us, their heavy boots echoing against the polished white floor. The corridor stretched long, sterile, and unwelcoming, lined with identical doors on both sides, each one locked, each one hiding something. We walked in silence, my pulse a steady drumbeat in my ears. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and something else, something metallic. The overhead lights flickered once, just enough to make my skin prickle. A turn. Then, another. With each step, the walls seemed to press closer, the fluorescent lights casting elongated shadows. Finally, the doctor stopped in front of an unmarked door, pressing his palm against the scanner. A low beep sounded, followed by the soft hiss of the lock disengaging. The door swung open. Inside, the room was cold and clinical. A metal table sat in the center, draped with a white sheet. Beside it, hospital equipment hummed quietly. Monitors, IV stands, and a heart rate monitor that blinked expectantly. The air carried a sharp, sterile scent, mingling with something unmistakable, anticipation. I stepped inside, my stomach nodding as the doctor followed, the bodyguards remaining just outside. This was it. No turning back now. The doctor let out a quiet sigh, tapping a finger against his clipboard. "Get on the table." His tone was sharp, but not unkind. Just business. I hesitated for a moment before finally pushing myself up and onto the cold metal surface. The paper sheet crinkled beneath me as I settled in. The air smelled like antiseptic, sharp and sterile. The doctor moved with practiced efficiency, reaching for the helmet resting beside a bank of machines at the front of the room. It was sleek and metallic, wires extending from the sides, feeding into the screens displaying rolling waves of brain activity. "This helmet," he began, adjusting the fit over my head, "will monitor everything happening in your brain in real time. Every electrical impulse, every reaction as you transition through different states of consciousness." He secured it snugly, the metal cool against my scalp. "First, you'll experience a near-death state. Your life may flash before your eyes. That's just your brain processing its own shutdown, a final burst of neural activity before—" He snapped his fingers. "It starts to fade." He moved quickly, attaching electrodes to my temples, my wrists, my chest. The machines beeped steadily, recording my vitals. "But that's not what we're looking for," he continued, adjusting a few dials. "We're searching for what happens after, when the brain ceases all function. No more activity, No more signals. He glanced at me, his expression unreadable. If something remains, anything, then we found our answer. The hum of the machines grew louder. The wires tugged slightly as he made final adjustments. Are you ready? He asked, standing over me now, fingers hovering over the controls. I exhaled. My heart pounded. Yes. The doctor picked up a syringe filled with a clear liquid, tapping it twice before pressing the needle against the inside of my arm. This will slow your heart rate and guide you into a controlled death, he murmured. The cold sting of the needle pierced my skin, a slow pressure flooding through my veins. The machines beeped steadily, then slowed. Count down from 10, the doctor instructed, or a higher number if that helps. I swallowed, my tongue heavy. 10, 9, E. My voice faltered. My limbs felt weightless, my fingers tingling. 7. My breath shuddered. My heartbeat thudded in my ears, slowing with each beat. 6. The lights above me blurred, the doctor's face turning into a hazy silhouette. 5. Everything slipped away. The last thing I heard was the prolonged, unbroken beep of the heart monitor. Then, nothing. A void. An endless, suffocating emptiness. No sound, no light, no thought, just absence. A sudden burst of light pierced through the blackness, sharp and blinding. The world around me flickered, strange and fast, like I was watching a reel of old film, but backward, racing through moments that didn't belong in my head. It wasn't just a memory. It felt like I was there, reliving it all, but in reverse. First, I saw the mangled wreck of the car. My car, twisted and crumpled. The bodies of my wife and son, lifeless, broken, their faces pale and still. The sound of sirens, the rush of air, the tension that filled the air. Then, it unraveled. Their bodies began to move. The blood was sucked back into their wombs. Their faces twisted back into a peaceful stillness, as if they were merely asleep. Slowly, the broken pieces of metal that had once pinned them in place pushed themselves back into their rightful spots, and the car itself began to uncrumple, shifting back to its original form. And then, life. My son's laughter echoed in the air, the sound of his tiny hands gripping my fingers. My wife's smile, warm and loving, filled my heart as she ran her fingers through my hair. I could feel the love they had for me, all of it. I felt my son's small body snuggling against me, his soft breath against my neck. The deep, overwhelming love of a family. But it all moved backward, their joy turning to the silence of death. I felt their sadness too, the quiet moments when they had worried about me, when I wasn't the man I should have been. The days they spent holding their breath, hoping I would snap out of it. I saw myself older, jaded, angry. I could feel the weight of my choices, the toll I'd taken on everyone around me. The people I had hurt, the friends I'd pushed away, the promises I'd broken. I felt their hurt, the quiet anger they'd buried, and the disappointment in their eyes. The pain was raw, as if it had just happened, as if it were still happening. But then, the love, the smiles. I could feel it, the warmth of moments I cherished, the people I cared about, my parents, my friends, the strangers I'd helped when I could, the laughter of those who found joy in the smallest of things. I felt their happiness like a warmth spreading through my chest, the relief they'd felt when they found peace in their own lives. Their joys weren't just theirs. They were mine too, because I had been there for them, even when I didn't realize it. But it was all unraveling. The memories, good and bad, dissolving into the blackness once more. And then the beginning. The innocence of childhood, when the world was new and wide and waiting. I saw my mother and father smiling at me, the way they'd look down at me with love in their eyes. The warmth of my first steps, the joy of my first words, the quiet moments spent in their embrace. But before I could reach the start, before I could even fully understand it, the light flickered, and then, again, nothing. Blackness swallowed everything. I gasped, a sharp breath filling my lungs as I jerked awake. The sterile smell of the room clung to the air, and my heartbeat pounded in my chest, faster, harder, like it was trying to escape. My hands trembled as I reached up, feeling the cold metal of the helmet still strapped to my head. I tore it off in a panic, the click of the machine's monitor now silent. I sat up slowly, scanning the room. It was the same sterile white walls, the same bright fluorescent lights overhead. But something was wrong. The machines that had been hooked up to me, gone. The bed was empty. The IVs, the wires, the monitors that had tracked every breath and pulse, no longer present. I stood, my legs wobbly like they hadn't carried me in years. Something gnawed at the back of my mind, a deep, unsettling feeling that refused to go away. Where was everyone? I could feel the panic rising, but I pushed it down. I stumbled out of the room, my vision blurry, as though I was seeing the world through a fog. The hallway stretched in front of me, but everything felt distant, muted. My head was pounding, but I wasn't sure if it was from the after effects of whatever they'd done, or something else entirely. I squinted, trying to clear my vision, but the more I walked, the less clear everything became. The walls stretched longer, the hallway darker, as I stumbled forward, trying to find my bearings. I blinked rapidly, forcing my eyes to adjust to the overwhelming sense of wrongness. I couldn't place it. Was this the same facility? Was I still in the same place? Was I even me anymore? Then, in the distance, I saw him. A figure, standing still in the middle of the hallway, framed by the dim light at the end. A boy. Maybe 13. Maybe younger. He was small, thin. His clothes faded like they'd been worn for years. His head was down, his dark hair hanging over his face so I couldn't see his eyes. He was just standing there, facing away from me, completely still. The further I walked, the more questions popped into my mind. Who was this boy? Why was he here? Was he a part of the experiment too? I wanted to call out to him, to ask him what was going on, but I couldn't bring myself to speak. A strange unease had settled over me, heavier than anything I had ever felt before. It wasn't just confusion anymore. It was fear. Fear of the unknown. Fear of what I might have come back to. The boy stood there, like a shadow in the hallway, unmoving. And for a moment, I wondered if I was still dreaming. If I hadn't truly woken up at all. But the coldness in the air, the creaking of the building, the strange emptiness that surrounded me, it all felt so real. I took a hesitant step forward. The boy didn't move. Another step. He still didn't react. "Hey," I called, my voice rough. Barely a whisper in the stillness. Nothing. Not even a flicker. Just silence. And yet, something in my gut told me I had to keep walking. Something told me that this boy was tied to it all. Something important. Something I couldn't yet understand. I wasn't sure what I was walking toward, but at that moment I knew one thing for certain. I may never turn back. The closer I got, the more details began to form around the boy. Details that were once blurry in the distance, but were now strikingly clear. He stood there, facing away from me, his small frame almost unnaturally still. As I approached, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He was wearing tattered clothes, an old shirt, a pair of faded jeans, but there was an odd quality to them, like they were far too worn for someone his age. His shirt, a dull gray, had small tears at the edges, the fabric fraying at the sleeves. His sneakers, once white, were now stained with dirt and worn at the soles. His hair, dark and messy, hung over his forehead, barely covering his eyebrows. But it was his face that struck me the most. He looked older than he should. There was a wisdom in his eyes that I couldn't fully see because of the way his head hung low. But when I did catch a glimpse, they were far too old, too knowing for someone who seemed no older than 13. I stopped a few feet away from him. The silence in the hallway was suffocating, the stillness oppressive. It was like the air had thickened, becoming too heavy to breathe. There was no sound, no footsteps, no chatter, just the odd, unsettling quiet that seemed to press against my chest, making my heart beat faster with every breath I took. "Where is everyone?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, though it felt as if my words were swallowed by the emptiness around me. I looked around, expecting to see someone, anyone, but there was nothing. No sign of life anywhere. It was as though the whole world had stopped moving. Then, just as I reached out, I saw his head tilt up. His eyes, those deep, ancient eyes, looked straight into mine, and I felt a cold chill run through me. And then he spoke. "I am." His words pierced the silence like a thunderclap. The weight of them hit me all at once, and for a second, I froze in place. I am. Those words, simple yet profound, felt like an answer to a question I hadn't even realized I was asking. The question that had been gnawing at the back of my mind ever since the moment I had crossed over. The question about what was real, what was beyond life, what came after. Who was this boy? What was he? And why was he here? Are you God? The question spilled from my lips without thought. It felt like the right thing to ask. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I couldn't stop myself. I needed to know, needed some sort of confirmation about what was happening. The boy didn't blink, didn't move. He just stood there, watching me with those impossibly old eyes. I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I am that I am. His voice was calm, almost as if he were reciting a verse, something ancient, something written thousands of years ago. His words resonated in the stillness, echoing in the empty space around us, and yet they felt so utterly familiar. The words were from the Bible, a scripture I'd heard long ago, but hearing them now, in this moment, with this boy standing in front of me, it was like they were meant just for me. But why? Why was he here? What did it all mean? I stood there, frozen, unable to form another question. The boy's presence was overwhelming, suffocating, as if the weight of eternity was pressing down on me. Everything I thought I knew, everything I'd been through, everything I'd experienced, it all seemed insignificant compared to the magnitude of what stood before me. But even though I had no answers, I felt like I was standing on the edge of something beyond death, beyond the experiment, beyond everything. And this boy, this strange, otherworldly figure, was the key. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Instead, all I could think was, why me? The boy stood there, his small form so strangely out of place in the emptiness of the hallway. There was an unsettling stillness in the air, and it was as if the very space around us was holding its breath. His eyes, ancient and knowing, never left mine, and as I stared back at him, a question burned in my mind. Why a child? Why did God appear to me as a young boy? But before I could even speak, his voice cut through the silence once more, as if he were reading my thoughts. "You aren't supposed to be here," he said, his voice steady. But there was an underlying tremor, something in his tone that hinted at confusion, or perhaps something more. "How are you here?" I couldn't answer. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. My mind was racing, spinning with thoughts of the impossible reality unfolding in front of me. I was standing here, in a world that didn't seem to exist, talking to God, in the form of a child, and somehow, he knew what I was thinking. "This is the form you recognize me as," he said, answering the silent question in my mind. "This is how you see me. This is how you perceive me." I stared at him, completely dumbfounded. It felt as if I was standing in the presence of something far beyond my comprehension. And yet, something about the way he spoke was so familiar, so hauntingly human. How did he know? I asked, "Why do you know the answers to the questions in my head?" The boy didn't blink, didn't hesitate. He looked at me with those unfathomable eyes and answered in a voice that was both ancient and childlike. "Sometimes I am omniscient, and sometimes I ain't." I stood there, speechless. How could I process this? Everything I had known about reality, about life, about God, it was all being dismantled in front of me, piece by piece. What was this place? What was happening? I finally managed to speak, my voice shaky. "Why are you here?" The boy's gaze darkened, and for a brief moment I saw something in his eyes. A flicker of something ancient. Something deeply troubling. His expression shifted, and the air around us seemed to thicken with a weight I couldn't explain. "I am hiding," he said slowly, each word laced with a quiet sorrow that sent chills down my spine. "I never died. I am still here, but I am hiding." "Hiding?" I echoed, my voice almost lost in the stillness. "Hiding from who?" He didn't hesitate, his voice low and grave. "I am hiding from the creator of me. He wants to enslave me, and other gods, even humanity. He wants control. He wants everything. And I hid this world from him. The words hung in the air like a heavy fog, settling over me with an unnatural weight. My mind couldn't fully grasp what he was saying. Who was this creator? Why did he want to enslave gods and humanity? And why was this child, this boy, hiding from him? I swallowed, my throat dry. Who is this creator? What is his name? The boy's eyes flashed with a hint of something darker, something dangerous. His name is Samael, he said, his voice laced with a quiet venom. That is the name he goes by. Samael, the name echoed in my mind, unfamiliar but somehow important. There was a terrible finality in the way the boy said it, as though Samael's very name held power that could unravel everything. I took a step back, my head spinning. What was all of this? What had I stumbled into? And why was I part of it? The answers were beyond my understanding, beyond anything I could have imagined. Yet, I was standing here, in this place with this boy, who spoke with the weight of eternity. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy, and for the first time since I awoke, I felt the true enormity of what was happening. I was no longer just part of an experiment, no longer just a man searching for answers. I had become entangled in something much larger, something that threatened to shatter everything I thought I knew. And in front of me stood a child, no, God, who was hiding from Samael, the creator, the one who wanted to control everything. I wasn't sure where I fit into this, but I knew, with every fiber of my being, that I couldn't leave. Not yet, not until I understood what had truly happened, and what my role was in this cosmic battle between gods. The boy, this child who had called himself God, stood there before me, his eyes carrying the weight of unimaginable truth, and I felt a tremor of dread crawling up my spine. His next words hit me like a sudden thunderclap. Samael, he said slowly, is the one who created me. He created all the gods, even the ones you don't know about, but a god also created him. Everything has a start. It's like a domino effect. Once you knock it down, it never stops going until it reaches the end. And right now, there's a battle going on, a battle that no one knows about. No human knows about this. I stood frozen, unable to speak, my mind whirling as I tried to process the magnitude of what he was saying. The very fabric of reality itself seemed to be unraveling before my eyes, and I was caught right in the middle of it, helpless. I'm the first one I've told this to, the boy continued, his voice laced with a hint of urgency. I've been hiding here, waiting until I saw you. You have to go back. You're not supposed to be here. You better run. Because this God, Samael, created other beings. And these beings, it's not something you want to mess with. They destroyed heaven. They destroyed hell. And next, they might destroy this world. His words hung in the air like a cold, heavy weight, and my stomach twisted in fear. Destroyed heaven? Destroyed hell? How was any of this possible? And why was I the one hearing it? Why had I, of all people, been chosen to know this truth? I don't know how to get back, I whispered, my voice thick with confusion. I can't go back. I don't have the willpower to, and I don't even know how I ended up here. The boy's gaze softened, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something resembling pity in his eyes. I can't do anything. If I were to help you, they would find out where I am. I can't use my powers. That's why I don't answer prayers anymore. That's why I don't show up. That's why humanity never sees me. Because I'm in hiding. I could feel the weight of his words pressing down on me. This child, this God, was hiding, not just from Samael, but from everything that existed. He was running from something so vast, so dangerous, that even his godly powers couldn't shield him. And now, I was caught in the middle of it all. Then what am I supposed to do? I asked, my voice shaking with the enormity of the situation. How can I go back? And what if it's too late? I can't tell you, he replied, his tone heavy with regret. I can't even help you. But I can tell you this. The battle is already in motion. It's a fight for control. Control over everything. Even over you, over this world. And Samael isn't someone you want to cross. You need to get out of here. You have to go back before it's too late. The finality in his voice hit me like a jolt of electricity, and I stood there, overwhelmed, my mind spinning with questions I couldn't answer. This battle, this war between gods, was far bigger than anything I had ever imagined. and now I was tangled up in it, with no way to return to the life I had known. But the boy was right, I had to go back. Somehow, I had to find my way out of this place, away from whatever forces were at play, before Samael or these other gods found me. And as I turned to leave, my heart pounding in my chest, I could only wonder what would happen next, what kind of world I was returning to, and what role I would play in this cosmic struggle for power. Would I survive the battle? Would I even be able to escape? All I knew was that my life, as I knew it, was over, and I was stepping into a world that might never be the same again. The sudden sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway, sharp and deliberate, sending a jolt of panic through me. My heart hammered in my chest, and before I could even react, the boy grabbed my arm, pulling me swiftly into one of the nearby rooms. We hid behind the door, breathless, as the footsteps grew louder. "Shh," the boy whispered urgently, pressing his finger to his lips. His eyes were wide with fear, but there was something else in them too, an ancient knowing, a fear of the unknown that chilled me to my core. They're here. The air around us seemed to thicken, every nerve in my body on high alert. The footsteps were closer now, but something was wrong. They weren't the typical sounds of human feet. These were different, strange, uneven, almost like a mixture of humanoid and something else. Something animalistic. I strained to hear, focusing on the peculiar rhythm of the steps. The sounds seemed to come in waves, like claws scraping against the floor, interspersed with a soft, almost guttural breathing. It was like nothing I had ever heard before. The steps were heavy, yet fluid, predatory yet calculated. The boy's grip tightened on my arm, his expression tense as he slowly crouched down, motioning for me to follow his lead. We knelt low, trying to make ourselves as small as possible in the dimly lit room. The door barely cracked open to allow us to see into the hallway. Then, through the sliver of light, I saw them. They were silhouettes at first, but as they moved closer, I could make out their features, twisted forms that seemed almost human, but not quite. Their limbs were too long, their bodies unnaturally thin, with joints that bent in strange, unnatural ways. Their faces, if they could be called faces, were a grotesque blend of animal and something darker. Hollow, glowing eyes peered out from the shadows, scanning the hallway with an eerie, predatory awareness. I swallowed hard, barely able to breathe as they passed by, their movements so silent, yet so deliberate. Every step they took made the air feel heavier, charged with an unnatural energy. I could feel the boy beside me shaking slightly, his own fear palpable. What are they?" I whispered, my voice barely audible, as the creature's eyes flickered in our direction. "They're not supposed to be here," the boy said, his voice shaking slightly. "They're a byproduct of Samael's creations. They're his hunters. They'll find you if they sense you. And right now, they're hunting us." I watched, terrified, as the creatures continued down the hall. Their strange, fluid movements were hypnotic, but they were nothing short of monstrous. As they passed the door, I could feel a cold, oppressive presence wash over me, like the very air had become thicker, darker. One of them paused, its head tilting slightly, as if sensing something in the room. My breath hitched in my throat, and I instinctively held my own breath, praying it wouldn't hear me. Its glowing eyes scanned the room, its lips curling back in what almost looked like a smile, a horrific, predatory smile. The boy tugged at my arm again, pulling me further back into the shadows, his eyes wide with desperation. "Stay quiet. Don't move." I nodded, my entire body stiff with fear as I tried to remain as still as possible. The creature's gaze lingered for a moment longer, and then, thankfully, it moved on, continuing down the hallway with the others. I let out a slow, shaky breath, my heart still racing in my chest. What the hell were those things? "Monsters," the boy replied, his voice tight. "Samael created them to hunt down anyone who gets too close to the truth. And right now, that's us." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a strange mix of sorrow and determination. "We need to move. They're going to keep looking until they find us. And when they do, there will be no escaping." The door slammed open with a violent force, splinters of wood flying across the room as the creatures poured in. There was no warning, no sound to announce their arrival beyond the deafening crash. They moved in, silent and eerie, their long, twisted limbs scraping against the floor, their eyes glowing like embers in the dark. These creatures were even more grotesque up close. Their bodies were long and thin, with unnaturally long arms and legs that seemed to bend at the wrong angles. Their skin was pale and stretched, almost translucent, like something that had been marred by time and decay. Jagged, sharp claws extended from their fingers, and their faces were the stuff of nightmares, twisted amalgamations of human features and animalistic traits. Hollow, cavernous eyes stared out, glowing with a sickly yellow light, their mouths full of sharp, uneven teeth, grinning like predators watching their prey. Their bodies were slick with something dark and viscous, and the scent that filled the room was rancid, like blood in decay, the stench of something ancient and wrong. Their movements were jerky but deliberate, as though they had all the time in the world to catch their prey. One of them, its head too large for its body, turned toward the boy and me with a slow, deliberate motion, its grin widening as it took a step forward, its tongue slithering from its mouth like a serpent. The boy's grip on my arm tightened. "We need to go, now." But before we could react, God grabbed my arm, his touch firm, and suddenly, without any warning, the world around us bent and twisted, the air around us warping like a liquid. In an instant, we were no longer in the dark, sterile hallway. We were in a vast, cavernous room, filled with a heavy silence that pressed down on me from all sides. It looked like heaven, at least what I imagined heaven would look like. But something was terribly wrong. The golden light that should have filled the space was dim, flickering like a dying flame. The air was thick, with an unnatural stillness, and the entire realm felt like it had been abandoned, left to rot. The throne room was vast, stretching endlessly in every direction. The walls seemed to pulse with an eerie, soft glow, and the floor was made of smooth white stone, covered in patches of what looked like blood, angelic blood. Bodies littered the ground, their forms twisted and broken, wings torn and broken at the base, feathers scattered like ash across the cold stone. There were no signs of life, no movement, not a single whisper of sound, just an overwhelming emptiness. In the center of the room stood an empty throne, its seat barren, untouched. It was magnificent, made of the purest gold, encrusted with precious gems that shimmered faintly in the dim light. But there was no one sitting there. The absence was suffocating. I turned to God, my voice shaky, with the overwhelming sense of horror that gripped me. Where is everyone? Where are the humans when they die? If there is no heaven, then where? God's gaze softened, but there was a deep sadness in his eyes as he looked at me. They get reincarnated, he said quietly. Sent back to Earth. They are protected, for now. They don't stay here. Not anymore. I took in the bodies around us, the empty throne and the endless empty space. Why? Why is it like this? Because Samael, he said, his voice low and filled with pain, and his creations, they destroyed heaven, destroyed everything. His eyes darkened as he looked at me. And they're looking for you. Every second you're with me, you're a beacon, a signal, a threat. I shuddered, my mind racing with confusion and fear. What do you mean? Why would I be a beacon? You're the first person to know the truth, God said, his voice heavy with the weight of ancient knowledge. You're not supposed to be here. You've seen what shouldn't be seen, and that makes you dangerous. To them. I looked at the empty throne once more, the silence overwhelming. Heaven, this place, was no longer a sanctuary. It was a graveyard, and I had stumbled into it. They'll come for you, God continued, his gaze distant, focused on something unseen. They'll come for both of us. I can't protect you here, not for long. And then it hit me, the full weight of what I had just learned. The world I thought I understood, the one I thought had been destroyed, was still out there. But it was nothing like I had imagined. The truth was far darker than I could have ever imagined. And now, I was trapped in the middle of it all, with no way to turn back. I asked another question, the one that had been gnawing at me for so long. Where is Satan in all of this? God paused, his expression darkening, as if the mere mention of his name brought an unsettling weight to the air. He was taken by Samael, God said, his voice filled with a sadness I couldn't quite understand. "He took my son, and I've never seen him again. I don't talk about it much. Please, stop asking more questions about him." Suddenly, God's tone shifted. He seemed to gather himself, his gaze piercing. "It's been a pleasure meeting you," he said, almost reluctantly. "But you have to go back now. I will send you back. They already know I'm here because of you. You cannot tell anyone what really happened. You must lie. No one needs to know the truth. Only you get to know it. I want a witness. I needed a witness. And you will forever carry this memory with you, no matter how many reincarnations you experience. It doesn't matter if you're a bug, an ant, or a human being. You will always be able to remember what just occurred." Before he could finish, a burst of light erupted from nowhere, blinding and overwhelming. Creatures, demonic and otherworldly, poured from the light, their forms distorted and unnaturally twisted. Fear clenched my chest as I tried to comprehend what was happening. God's grip tightened around my arm, and his voice cracked through the chaos like thunder. "Go!" His command shook me to the core, and everything around me warped and distorted, as if reality itself were tearing apart. In an instant, I was pulled back, as if being sucked through an endless tunnel of light, and everything went white. I opened my eyes to a world that was not mine, but was unmistakably familiar. At first, everything was a blur. My surroundings were indistinct, moving like smudges in the periphery of my vision. I could barely make sense of what was happening. My body felt like it was still suspended in the void. Every part of me felt disconnected from myself. I tried to move, but it was like my body was trapped in molasses, slow and uncooperative. My hands trembled as I reached out, desperate for some kind of anchor in this strange, returning reality. Gradually, the blur started to clear, and I could see my hospital room. My body lay in that sterile, cold bed, machines around me quietly humming. The world outside the room seemed muted, distant. My mind screamed that something was wrong, that I shouldn't be here. My eyes flitted around, trying to make sense of the fragmented images before me. Everything was too still, too quiet. The hum of the machines felt out of place, almost foreign. My vision was sharp, but my body remained heavy, like it didn't quite belong to me anymore. Then the realization hit me. I was alive again. But that knowledge didn't fill me with relief. It felt wrong. The sudden weight of it was unbearable. I had come back, but there was a cold, uneasy emptiness around me. The air felt too still. The silence was too thick. It was as if the world had forgotten how to breathe. I felt the words rise in my throat, but they were choked back, trapped within me. What had just happened? What was the truth? The question that had haunted humanity for centuries echoed in my mind, unbidden. What happens after death? I didn't have to think long before the answer formed, and my voice, now steady though it felt foreign, spoke the truth that had been thrust upon me. "Reincarnation," I murmured, the word tasting bitter in my mouth. "We get reincarnated after death. That's what I learned." The eerie stillness in the room deepened. It felt as if the walls themselves were listening. I knew the truth now. I knew what God had been hiding. I had seen God, and I had seen what he was hiding from, the endless, dangerous creatures from the other side of existence. I had seen the battle, the war between gods, between Samael and the ones who created us all. I had learned that everything we know is a lie, that death is not the end, but only another cycle. And the truth about Satan, his disappearance, was a secret buried too deep for anyone to know. And now, I was the witness. I would carry this knowledge forever, no matter how many times I was reborn. The truth was carved into my very being. I saw God. And he is hiding. I know the truth now. And there's only a matter of time before they come for us.